Hello again. Today we are talking about assessment and curriculum design. And today I'm drawing very much on my background as someone who researches and teaches in the field of language curriculum design. Here is the cover of a book which I co-authored with my colleague Professor Paul Nation, also at Victoria University of Wellington. And it's one of two books that we've done together about curriculum design. So it seemed appropriate to think about testing and assessment within the whole process of designing a curriculum. So today you're going to do two things. You will, first of all, understand about the importance of thinking about assessment before you start teaching. And secondly, you're going to learn a bit more about diagnostic assessment. So diagnostic assessment was one of the 6 forms of assessment that we looked at in another talk. But let me begin with a bit of a story. I remember when I first began teaching. And one of the things you got given as you became a teacher when you joined the school was a Gradebook. So this was a book in which you recorded the names of your students and the grades they got as the year or the term went on. And I can remember more than once having the feeling towards the end of the term and looking at the Gradebook and knowing I had to write reports and give grades to my students, of looking in my Gradebook and thinking, oh no, I've got no grades recorded, which resulted in me giving students a flurry of little tests right towards the end of the term or the semester, so that I had some grades on which to base a report or a final grade. Now let me say this is dreadful practice, absolutely dreadful practice, because what I was doing essentially was this. I was testing for no obvious reason. It really wasn't even short-term achievement testing, which is something we've talked about in another film. It really was testing for no obvious reason. And this is something we should ban from our classrooms. We should never test for no obvious reason. So there are 2 points I want to take away from this little story. The first point is that we need to think about assessment before we start teaching. We need to know what we're going to assess and when. And the second point I want to make is, as part of that, is that we need to space our assessments so we have a reasonable amount of assessment. One thing I observe in my work when I evaluate teaching programs is often huge amounts of what I think are over-assessment. In one program I reviewed fairly recently, in some of the courses there were up to 19 assessment points. It seems a lot to me, and especially when the assessment is happening in class. So suddenly the teaching and learning time is being taken up by lots and lots and lots of assessment activity. So we need to think in advance about when we're going to assess and how we're going to assess and what the purpose is. So let's turn to diagnostic assessment. What is diagnostic assessment? Diagnostic assessment is what teachers do to find out what learners already know or do not know, what they can and cannot do. And it's very, very important to have this information. So how do we go about getting it? Well, I'm going to give 2 scenarios. One is that you can do some diagnostic assessment before teaching starts. And this is a good idea. It gives you some sense of who your learners are. So how can you do it? Well, you can go to different sources. You might, for example, look at curriculum documents to find out what the learners should already have covered and perhaps what they should be covering this year or this term with you as the teacher. Related to that is if you have access to them, you can look at the results the students got in their last class or last course or last year. This gives you some idea of where they are at. And if it's possible, good idea to chat with the person who taught the students before. Now, this obviously is easier in a system where students are moving from class to class to class, as opposed to coming into a new situation from many different settings. But if possible, it is another good source of information that provides some basis for diagnostic assessment before teaching starts. But of course, most of the diagnostic assessment will happen once you've met the students, once teaching starts. And there are a number of things, again, that you can do here. Some might be analysis of students' language use. This could take the form of observation of learning, a topic of another talk, or more rigorous and detailed analysis of language use. Similarly, you might get learners to self-assess, to say what they think they're good at, what they think they're not so good at, what they would like in the course. And the last one I'm going to mention is perhaps the most obvious one, and that is testing of some sort. An example of a very useful diagnostic test is this one, the vocab levels test. This gives you information about the vocab level of your students. Do they know the 2,000 most frequent words, or don't they? If they do know them, do they know the academic word list, or don't they? So knowing your students' vocab levels can help you to diagnose what their language needs are and what they need to do to improve. And this, of course, is the point of diagnostic assessment. It helps you to help your learners to improve. When I'm talking in curriculum design terms, I'm often talking about this as a form of needs analysis. So I'm going to leave you with an image, an analogy that I think is very appropriate to this subject. And that's the idea of a GPS. Many of you will have them in your cars, I suspect, if you're lucky enough to own a car. Why is it like a GPS? Well, a GPS is something that gets you from A to B. It tells you where you are now, where you want to go, and how to get there. So when you're doing diagnostic assessment or needs analysis, that's what you are doing for your learners. You're finding out where they are now, you're finding out where they need to be, and you, as the expert, as the teacher, are using your skills and your knowledge to plan a teaching program that will get your learners from point A to point B. And that is a really worthwhile thing to do. Thank you.